So, let's talk about a band that did more than just write songs. I mean, they literally drew up the blueprint for an entire genre. A band that got huge, like global superstar huge, without ever selling out. We're talking, of course, about R.E.M. And hey, don't just take my word for it. When Kurt Cobain, yeah, the guy from Nirvana, a band that pretty much turned rock music upside down in the 90s, when he calls you saints for how you handled success, well, you know you're dealing with something on another level. So that's the big question, right? How on earth did a group of art students from a southern college town become the architects of American alternative rock? To really get it, we've got to go back to where it all started, Athens, Georgia. Okay, so the year is 1980. You've got these four very different people who find each other. There's Michael Stipe, this kind of mysterious art student and lead singer. Then you have Peter Buck, the guy working at the record store who knew everything about punk rock. And rounding it out, you've got Mike Mills and Bill Berry, a musical duo since high school, who became this incredible rhythm section that just held the whole thing together. Now here's what's just wild. Right from the get-go, they made a deal. They decided to be a real democracy. That meant every single song, every royalty check was split four ways, evenly. Think about that. In the music business, which is just full of egos and fights over money, it was revolutionary. It sent a clear message. No one guy was more important than the band. And that idea, that became the secret sauce for why they lasted so long. And the sound, what did they sound like? Well, it was totally new. People started calling it jangle pop. Here's how you can think about it. Imagine taking those shimmery, clear guitar parts from a band like the Byrds in the 60s and then slamming them together with the raw, nervous energy of post-punk. That mix, that was their signature. It was the sound that basically fueled the entire college radio scene. So you can really see this blueprint in action during their early years on IRS Records. Look, they weren't an overnight thing. It was a slow, steady build. But in 1983, their first album, Murmur, was so incredible that Rolling Stone picked it as Album of the Year. Get this, over Michael Jackson's Thriller. Yeah, Thriller. And by 87, with their album Document and that huge hit, The One I Love, they had made the jump. They went from being these beloved indie darlings to certified platinum artists. So after all those years of building a fan base, tour by tour, record by record, the major labels finally came knocking. And in 1988, they signed a deal with Warner Bros. For, wait for it, $10 million, which back then was just a staggering amount of money. The underground was officially about to go mainstream in a big, big way. And what happened next? Just their absolute peak. The early 90s were insane for them. You get Out of Time, then Automatic for the People, and then Monster. Boom, boom, boom. 3 albums in a row, and each one sold more than 4 million copies, just in the US. They weren't just a big band anymore. They were literally one of the biggest bands on the planet. But here's the thing. At the very peak of their fame, when they could do anything they wanted, they did something truly remarkable. They used that power. They decided not to tour their biggest album, Out of Time. Instead, they put their energy behind the Rock the Vote campaign. They'd get up on award show stages and talk about gun control. Their lyrics started to take sharp aim at US policy. They basically showed everyone that you could be a massive rock star and still have a conscience. So, after a full 6 years off the road, away from that whole grind, they finally decided it was time. In 1995, they launched this huge world tour for the album Monster. This was supposed to be their big, triumphant comeback to the stage. But it ended up becoming a fight for their very survival. And nightmare is barely the word for it. It all happened so fast. On March 1st, their drummer Bill Berry collapses right on stage in Switzerland. A brain aneurysm. He survived, thankfully. But then, in July, their bassist Mike Mills needs emergency surgery for an intestinal tumor. And just a month after that, Michael Stipe is rushed into surgery for a hernia. It was just one life-threatening thing after another. Relentless. You can imagine the trauma from that tour just hung over them. And in 1997, Bill Berry, the guy who was the rhythmic heart of the band, decided he was done. He retired, and it was totally amicable. But that left the other three with a massive choice. Do we call it quits, or do we figure out how to keep going? And I think their own words say it all. A 3-legged dog is still a dog. They decided to carry on. But now, as a trio, they had to totally reinvent their sound. They kicked it off by diving into electronics and drum machines with this really experimental album, Up, in '98. The 2000s were kind of up and down for them, navigating this new reality. But for their last couple of albums, they came roaring back with that powerful rock sound, finding their groove again as a whole new version of R.E.M. And then came 2011, and they did something that almost no band of their size ever does. They just stopped. They called it a day. There was no big drama, no messy public breakup, no slow, sad fade out. They just put out a statement saying they were done. They chose to protect their legacy, and maybe even more important, to protect their friendship. So when we talk about that R.E.M. blueprint, what are we really saying? It's this simple, powerful idea. You maintain total creative control. You build your audience organically through things like college radio, and you run your band like an ethical, democratic partnership. That exact model, that's what made it possible for bands like Nirvana, Radiohead, and so many others. They showed a whole generation of artists that, yes, you can get huge and not lose your soul in the process. I mean, the numbers are just staggering. We're talking over 70 million records sold, a bunch of Grammys, and just recently, in 2024, they were inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame, which is so well-deserved. But you know, their real legacy isn't just in the numbers, it's in every single artist they inspired, by showing them that you didn't have to choose between your integrity and success. You could have both. And that kind of brings us to a final thought here. The story of R.E.M. is full of huge success and amazing resilience. But maybe, just maybe, their final act was their most powerful one. In an industry that is all about the comeback tour that never wants to let go, what's the real value in knowing when to just say goodbye? To be the one who decides when the story ends? Maybe that's the final lesson from the architects of alternative rock.